My wife, Abby, loved going to the movies. If I wanted to make my wife happy, all I had to do was take her to a good movie. I couldn't just take her to a movie with me. It had to be in one of four categories: animation, action adventure, drama, or romance. Abby also went to almost any movie that was with Tom Torino, Matt Wright, or Brad Talbot. They were her favorite actors. My first date with Abby was when I took her to Sleepless in Seattle. She didn't really like Tom Hanks, but she loved the story. Years after we got married, she confessed that she fell in love with me after that movie. Why she did it, I have no idea. After 12 years of marriage, Abby is still a very beautiful woman. At 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing 115 pounds, she has a magnificent figure. Her dark emerald green eyes really stand out against her raven hair. When Abby gets dressed for the exit, she still turns the men's heads in her direction. My name is John Sawyer, and I'm not a slouch either. I'm 6'1" and 180 pounds. I have sandy hair and blue eyes. Abby and I have been told many times that we are a wonderful couple. During college, before I met my future wife, I never lacked for female companionship. However, when I met Abby, I realized that I didn't want anyone else. And for 12 years, I thought Abby felt the same way about me. We met in our freshman year and fell in love with each other. Our love grew during the 4 years we spent at one of the state universities, and we got married 3 months after graduation. Abby is my true love, my soul, my everything. I couldn't imagine life without her. And although we both love our 2 children to the core, it really has to be spontaneous when they're not around. Tonight was supposed to be just for the 2 of us. We decided to go dancing with 3 other couples in the evening. Since we had to walk late and drink, we booked rooms at a hotel in the city center. My parents and I had agreed to take 2 of our girls for the night, so it was supposed to be a really special night. It turned out to be something special. Okay, not at all what I thought it would be. When we got to the nightclub, I couldn't figure out what was going on. But the mood seemed to have soured. The women seemed to be nervous about something, and one of the men seemed somehow smug. Of the 3 couples, I really liked George and Helen, as well as Bob and Anna. George was a software engineer. While Helen was a stay-at-home mom with 3 children, Bob owned his own plumbing company, and his wife worked in an office doing accounting. The only couple I didn't really like were Chad and Thelma. And to tell you the truth, I was fine with Thelma, but I thought Chad was a jerk. But Abby and Thelma were college roommates and remained good friends, so I had to put up with Chad. As far as I could understand, he had something to do with the film industry. I think Chad said he was an agent or something. From what I could understand, he wasn't very successful. But Thelma had a high-paying job as a pharmaceutical representative. I am a financial consultant at one of the major brokerage houses. When I first started doing business, everything was slow, but now I have more things to do than I want. The way this works with my firm is that once you reach a certain number of clients, the firm insists that you train someone and install a new consultant with your redundant clients. Of course, you keep the most profitable customers for yourself. I've had to do it twice before, and I'm close to doing it again. I'm really good at making a living. Abby started working as an administrative assistant for Mike Winston, executive vice president of the regional bank. When our 2 girls were born a year apart, Abby became a stay-at-home mom until Stacy, our youngest, started first grade. Then one day, Mike called her and announced that he had been promoted to president, and he asked if she would be interested in working for him part-time. Abby asked me, and I told her to go for it. If you think I made a mistake by letting Abby go back to work and now she's sleeping with her boss, you'd be completely wrong. Mike is 62 years old, bald, but more importantly, he is completely devoted to his wife and 5 children. As I said, something was a little off, but I didn't know what it was, and at that moment, I didn't care. I was looking forward to an evening of dancing with my wife and a whole night of love afterwards. We went around the room as we knew several other couples who were there. If you dance well enough, you'll meet really good people. One couple turned out to be an old college friend, Fred Abbott, and his wife, Brenda. I stopped to talk to them while Abby and the others walked to our table. I was about to join my wife as soon as the music started playing, but then there was A noise in the doorway. A crowd gathered at the entrance and then parted. Brenda gasped, "What's wrong?" Fred asked, "Don't you know who it is?" Brenda held her breath. I looked back and saw an extremely handsome man. He was only about 5 feet 6 or 7 inches tall, but as women would say, he was gorgeous. Both Fred and I expressed our ignorance. "This is Brad Talbot," she blurted out. "He and his fiancée, Rita Summers, are two of the hottest stars in Hollywood." "Oh yeah," Fred said, and started looking past Brad. "I wonder if Rita Summers is here too?" "John, on a scale of 1 to 10, Rita is at least 15. Rita playfully slapped her husband's hand. "Dream about it. When I looked at Brad, I really recognized him. He was one of my wife's favorite actors. I was wondering if I could get an autograph for her." But what happened completely stunned me. Brad came right up to our table and asked my wife to dance. She jumped up without hesitation and danced the next 4 songs with him. I went to the table and sat down, completely furious. My wife didn't even ask me if I was okay with her dancing with someone else. When the 5th song started, I wanted to intervene, but Chad's glass fell to the floor. When he reached out to pick up the broken glass, he raised his bloody hand. "John, could you help me with this?" he asked. I looked at my dancing wife, and then it chatted. I should have just gone to my wife, but instead I followed Chad to the men's room. However, when I got there, the cut was very minor. However, I helped him clean it and tie it up with a paper towel. When I returned to the table, I only caught a glimpse of my wife leaving with Brad. I rushed after them. Chad was right behind me. And when we went out the front door into the parking lot, I saw Abby getting into the car with Brad. I ran to catch up with the car. The moment I saw Brad kissing Abby's hand while she was laughing at something, he said, "Chad kicked me in the legs. I fell to the ground, but I got up in an instant." "What the hell did you do?" I shouted, "Brad's just going to take your wife for a ride." He said with a grin. Thelma appeared a few seconds later. This is a dream date for Abby. She told Chad and me how much she liked Brad, so we agreed that he would ask her out. "That's my fucking wife!" I shouted. "Didn't you think I should know about this?" "Abby told us you'd say no," Chad said with a grin. "Just go with the flow. Go to hell with you. Go with the flow yourself," I shouted, pouncing and punching Chad right in the bridge of his nose. The sound of his nose shattering was the only good thing that night. Thelma then rushed at me, punching and trying to kick me. Luckily for me, Fred saw what was going on and followed me. He quickly pulled Thelma away and sat her down on the other side of him. He attacked my husband. Thelma started screaming. No, he didn't do that. Fred said calmly, "You two attacked him first. He was just defending himself." Thelma became enraged and called 911. The police arrived about 10 minutes later and began taking statements. Fred continued his story, and I told the same thing, adding that Chad was the first to kick me in the legs. The people who gathered after the riots only saw Thelma attack me. They told the officers that all they saw was that I was just trying to run away from her. As a result, Chad and Thelma were arrested. By the time the police left, I was devastated. I returned to our table and saw 2 women smiling. "There's everyone else?" Helen asked. "Chad and Thelma were arrested for assaulting me," I replied, trying my best to contain my anger. Abby left with Brad and seemed very happy about it. "This shouldn't have happened," Anna said. She just had to go outside with Brad, take some pictures, and then return to the table. "My wife and Thelma obviously didn't tell you what the real plan was," I said, getting up to have a drink. Fred caught up with me at the bar. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. "I don't know what the hell is going on," I admitted. "I hope my wife just went for a ride with this movie star, and we'll be back soon. When she gets back, we're going to have a very unfriendly conversation." "Look, John," Fred said worriedly, "I don't want to start a fire, but Brenda told me that Brad Talbot is a famous womanizer. He seems to enjoy sleeping with married women. I hope this doesn't apply to Abby, but I think you should prepare for the worst." My heart sank into my boots. I didn't know what to do, but I told Fred that I would be fine. Before returning to the table, I tried to call Abby on her cell phone. The call went straight to voicemail. The atmosphere was very awkward when I sat down. The wives looked very ashamed, and their husbands looked furious. I kept trying unsuccessfully to reach Abby. Finally, the other 2 couples said they were going back to the hotel. I told them I would stay for a while to see if Abby would come back. I waited for half an hour before heading to the hotel. I waited there until 3 in the morning, calling Abby's phone every 10 minutes. Finally disgusted, I checked out and headed home. I got there around 4 and sat down on the couch. I must have fallen asleep because the sun shining through our bay window woke me up. It was already 7 in the morning. I checked our bedroom, but Abby hasn't returned yet. Then I checked my cell phone, and there were no messages from Abby. So, I logged into my computer and opened our Facebook page. He exploded with photos of Brad and Abby leaving a nightclub, photos of them walking to his house, photos of Abby entering Brad's house on his arm. I searched on Hollywood websites, and they were all blown up by Brad's latest conquest, by a married woman. At that moment, I was beside myself with rage. I immediately called my lawyer, and since it was Saturday, my call was forwarded to his home. I was too happy about my call until I explained what was going on. He convinced me not to do anything until Abby returned home and explained her behavior. Finally, around 11, the front door opened and Abby came in with a big smile on her face. The smile disappeared when she saw the expression on my face. "We didn't do anything," Abby said immediately. "We just spent the night talking. I know I should have asked you, but I was sure you'd say no. You know how much I love movies, and that Brad Talbot is one of my favorite actors. Last night was like a fairy tale. Nothing happened. John, I still love you with all my heart." I just stared at her, and I could almost feel the steam coming out of my ears. "I want you to pack up your shit and go to your parents, you cheater. I can't even look at you right now." "John, why do you attach so much importance to this? What is it?" she asked with annoyance and a slight fear in her voice. "We were just talking. There was nothing special about it. It doesn't really matter. It's damn important to me," I said through gritted teeth. I don't believe for a second that nothing happened, but for the sake of argument, let's pretend that nothing happened. You're still embarrassing me in front of the whole world. "Now you're just being overly dramatic, John," Abby said, putting her hands on her hips. "No one outside our group knows anything. In Helen and Anna know that for me it was just a harmless adventure." "You stupid fool." I snapped, which made Abby recoil. I've never talked to her like that before. This is the main news on all Hollywood news sites. They have photos of you and Brad leaving a nightclub, heading to his house, and by now, there are probably photos of you leaving his house this morning. I think our marriage is over. So get your shit together and get out before I do something I'll regret later. Please, John, I'm sure you're exaggerating." Abby was on the verge of tears now. "I love you with all my heart. I'm sorry if I upset you, but nothing happened. I knew you'd be annoyed, but I thought you'd give me a pass when you found out nothing had happened. We have to deal with this. Think about the girls. You fool. You weren't thinking about your girls when you stormed off into the night with your movie. Star bastard." I hissed at her. "Would you like Stacy or Gail to do something like that when they come of age?" Abby turned pale at these comments and then burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, John. I didn't think it would be so important. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. You're right. You didn't think." I was beside myself and getting angrier by the minute. I knew I couldn't get back at Brad. He was Hollywood hot shit, and there was no way I could touch him. And I knew that a divorce would hurt me financially. But if it came to that, I was ready to work from home and sue for full custody of the girls. Since I was obviously the more stable of the two parents, I felt like I had a great chance at it. I don't think Abby ever considered that her actions might actually deprive her of the girls, but the thought of the damage a divorce would do to my daughters made me think hard. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was just making more coffee when the phone rang. So far, the media has not received my phone number, but I knew it would not be for long. Hello, I answered the call. This is John Sawyer, and your wife's name is Abby. A woman's voice asked me. Look, I snapped. I'm not in the mood to talk to reporters. There was a soft giggle, a bit like the ringing of bells. Okay, said the voice. I hate talking to them too. Who is this? I asked, ready to hang up. My name is Rita Summers, she replied softly. I think you've already met my fiancé, Brad Talbot. I didn't know what this conversation was about, but I wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. Do you love your wife? Rita asked. Her question puzzled me. I sighed. Despite everything my wife has done, I still love her. However, after all that has happened, I don't think there is any chance of saving our marriage. I just can't accept what she did. If I could offer you, hopefully, a way to save your marriage as well as save my relationship with Brad, would you be interested? My heart started to beat erratically. I had to sit down and think. Finally, I answered, yes, I would love to save my marriage, but I just don't see any way to do it. There was another soft giggle and then a sigh. I've been in love with Brad for a long time. We have known each other since childhood. He comes from a very dysfunctional family, just like me. His father was a womanizer, and as a result, his mother hated all men. She showed Brad absolutely no love. Nothing he did ever pleased his mother. He has already slept with married women many times. I think it's Brad trying to get the love his mother never gave him. Anyway, I come from the same dysfunctional family. Only in my family, my mother was a drunkard, and my father bullied me. Back then, Brad was all I had, and I loved him to the core. But then he left when his mother divorced his father. I've been crying for weeks. We reunited in Hollywood after we both became famous. I had heard stories about Brad and was very afraid to start a relationship with him. But as soon as we saw each other, we fell in love again. And when we got engaged, he promised me that relationships with married women were left behind. When I asked him about your wife, he said nothing had happened. I have no way to prove it one way or another. But right now, the thought of losing Brad is driving me crazy. Yes, my wife also told me that nothing had happened, I confessed, and the thought of losing her is driving me crazy too. Do you believe her? No, I do not know. I don't know either. I know Brad, and it would be completely out of character for him to bring a woman to his house and do nothing, but I suppose stranger things have happened. However, I proceed from the assumption that something really happened. So, I want him to understand the pain he caused me, and I want your wife to understand the same thing. I do not know if this will be enough, but I hope that if we succeed, we can move forward with our couples. I'm with you for now, I said. How are you going to achieve this? I'm not going to do this alone. We'll do it together. Now I was confused. What could I do to get back at my wife, let alone Brad Talbot? You're going to have to spell it out because I don't see how I can do anything. Last things first, she said. To get the maximum effect of what I want to do, I need you to slowly start a dialogue with your wife in the direction of a possible reconciliation. I'm going to do the same with Brad. I'm not talking to him right now. I would say that in 2 or 3 weeks, I will start talking to Brad, and you should let your wife move into your house around the same time. I'll let you know when. You're going to keep your distance anyway, and you shouldn't sleep with her. Why would I let her back in the house? As soon as she gets home, we'll have dinner together, and I'll explain my plan. I still have some parts of my plan that I want to think about. I still wasn't sure about it, but I didn't have any better ideas, so I decided to go with it. The first thing I did was call my parents and tell them I'd pick up the girls in half an hour. Then I called my administrative assistant, Joni, and told her that I would be working from home for the next week or so. I could tell by her voice that she already knew the story about Brad and my Abby. She was very sympathetic and told me to let her know if there was anything she could do to help. Finally, I called Abby's parents at home. Abby's father answered the phone and was very apologetic. He had seen some of the reports on the news, and he was ashamed, but he was greatly relieved when I asked him to get Abby on the phone. She burst into tears on the phone. She kept saying how sorry she was and how she wanted to come home so we could talk about it. Abby, I said calmly, I think it would be nice for us to be apart for a while. I'm going to work from home next week. You'll have to work from Monday to Wednesday. Why don't you pick up the girls on Wednesday night? Then we'll talk about everything. I plan to pick up the girls on Sunday evening. Please, John, she cried. I want to go home right now. I want us to be a family again. Don't you want us to be a family anymore? I thought we were a family, I said sadly, but then you made me doubt everything I thought we had. I'll see you Wednesday night, say around 5. I picked up the girls and told them that Mom would spend a few days with her grandparents. They had a lot of questions about why, but that topic dropped when we headed to McDonald's. The girls ran around playing games for 2 or 3 hours, and then we had dinner there. The phone rang just as we got home. I looked at the caller ID but didn't recognize it. When I answered, the reporter asked me if I wanted to comment on my wife's affair with Brad Talbot. I hung up the phone. After that, the phone rang every 5 minutes. I finally got him off the hook and just left him. Around 6 o'clock, my cell phone rang. It was Abby. Why don't you answer the phone? She demanded immediately. Because they were just reporters who wanted me to comment on your affair with Brad Talbot? There's no romance, Abby growled. I told you that nothing happened. Well, then you need to tell the rest of the world about it. Because for some reason they don't believe it, I said sarcastically. There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Abby then asked if she could talk to the girls. So I connected them to the line and sat down listening to this side of the conversation. They were chatting about their day at McDonald's. Finally, Stacy handed me the phone and said that Mom wanted to talk to me. Abby begged again to be allowed to return home. I told her I needed more time. On Wednesday evening, Abby was there at about 4 instead of 5. I was a little annoyed that she had ignored my instructions, but I decided to leave it. As it is, the girls were glad to see her, and Abby showered them with kisses. When she came up to kiss me, I backed away. She looked at me with pain and irritation. So that's how it's going to be now, she said irritably. If that's the case, maybe I should just pick up the girls and leave. If that's what you want to do, I said calmly and walked away. No, Abby said quickly, with a hint of panic in her voice. I think we should sit down and now talk about our problems. The girls want to pack their overnight bags because Abby told them they would be visiting their grandparents. What are we going to do? Abby asked after an awkward silence. I wish I knew, I replied. Right now I'm hurt, humiliated, and angry. Do you have any suggestions on how I can get rid of the big three? All I can do is apologize, Abby said, trembling slightly. I made a huge mistake. Please forgive me. I don't want to lose you. Abby, it's not that simple, I said. Leaning back and crossing my arms over my chest, the whole world looks at me like a cuckold. My wife cheated on me, and I didn't do anything about it. Abby started crying. I never meant to hurt you. I was so excited to meet Brad Talbot and see his house. I knew you'd be a little annoyed with me. But I never thought it would turn out to be such a mess. Abby, I want you to know that I sincerely hope that we can find a way to overcome this, I said, and her face brightened for a moment. But I also want you to know that I have consulted with a lawyer. If this turns into a divorce, I want you to know that I will seek full custody of the lie. Girls, I think you should hire your own lawyer. I don't want a divorce, she cried, and I'm not going to let you take my girls away from me. Abby, I'm not saying we're getting divorced, but I think we need to think about the worst case scenario, and I'm not trying to hurt you. I lied, but I think you need to keep in mind that with your recent notoriety, the court may be very supportive of my custody application. Please don't do this, Abby pleaded. I will do everything so that we can be together again. Why don't we just continue the conversation, I suggested. Actually, why don't we have lunch next Sunday when you hand over the girls to me? Suppose I decide to keep the girls with me. She said with a flash of anger in her voice, I don't like passing them back and forth. I don't think it's good for them. If you do, then I will have no choice but to start the divorce proceedings immediately. And remember, you're the one who sullied your name. I believe that the court will not favor the adulteress as the mother of impressionable girls. At that moment, the whole struggle flowed out of Abby. I won't do it. I don't want a divorce. At the beginning of the second week, I returned to my office. My assistants were very sympathetic to this. Some of my clients, not so many two in particular, thought it was really funny and started making fun of me. I politely asked them to drop the subject, but they kept teasing me. I've had enough. I told them that I was breaking off our relationship and transferring their portfolios to another office. Even though both of them tried to apologize, I told them that our relationship was over. The rumors reached my clients, and there was no more talk about my wife and brat. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Rita called me. Do you have any plans for tonight? What is it? She asked. When I made it clear that I didn't, she said, good, because you're having dinner with me at the Zoom Zoom restaurant at 7. A tie and a jacket are required. Then she hung up the phone. I was a little surprised when Rita told me that she had a reservation at Zoom Zoom. This is the most exclusive restaurant in the city. It usually takes a year to book, and it's incredibly expensive. I arrived at 7 and was directed to a private room at the back of the restaurant. There was only a table for 2, but the room was quite luxuriously furnished. There was even a velvet couch. Scenes of possible activity that took place on this piece of furniture flashed into my mind. About 5 minutes later, the door opened, and I saw Rita Summers come in. When I jumped to my feet, I realized that she was literally breathtaking. I had no doubt that the restaurant would have stopped completely when Rita came in. I estimated that she was about 5'4" or so. She had long blonde hair, soft brown eyes, and a figure that was maddening. But it was her smile that attracted you. For the life of me, I couldn't imagine why Brat would cheat on a woman like that. May I call you John? What is it? She asked, sitting down opposite me. I nodded and asked, how should I address you? Rita, of course, that gentle giggle made me smile. We ordered drinks and sat talking for a while. I told Rita a little about my work, but mostly I told her funny stories about my girls or about me when I was a clumsy teenager. Then the waiter returned and took our order. I didn't want to put pressure on Rita, but I couldn't wait to find out what her plan was. I didn't mind saving my marriage, but I had no idea how to do it. When we finished eating, she leaned back in her chair. First of all, John, Rita said with a sad smile, that sneaky snake. Chad Tompkins organized this whole mess. He fancies himself a movie agent, but in reality he is nothing more than a pimp. He sets up gullible men and women to be taken advantage of by movie stars. You wouldn't believe how many people, especially married women, go to bed with movie stars with the help of Chad. You're talking to someone who knows this firsthand, I said with a growl. However, I didn't know exactly what Chad's job was. At least I was able to beat him up. Really? Rita's eyes sparkled. This is good news, but you really shouldn't be too harsh with your wife. I believe Brad could charm Mother Teresa by taking off her panties. As you already know, your wife is not the first married woman to fall under his spell, but I intend to make her the last. And if I can't do that, then what I'm offering will at least repay him and your wife for the pain they caused us. I can't promise that once my plan is completed, either of us will still be with our lovers. However, despite this, we will feel satisfied that we have avenged their betrayal and lies. I was somewhat puzzled by Rita's willingness to give my wife some indulgence, but I was very glad to hear that there would be some kind of payback. Now, I just wanted her to tell me how we were going to do it. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked. Before I get into the details, I just want to say that you are an extremely handsome man. And you're also very charming. I think your wife was a fool to jeopardize your marriage. If we had met under different circumstances, I would have been very interested in meeting you. That's very kind of you. But we both know that we travel in completely different worlds. And you're not just stunning, but even more than that, you're insanely beautiful. You're very kind. You're right about our two different worlds, of course. But that doesn't change the fact that I find you very attractive. Thank you was all I could think of to say, because I wanted to know the plan. So what are we going to do next? I intend to become your client within the next 2 weeks. I'm sorry, I don't understand. A client? Yes, you do offer financial advice to your clients, don't you? Rita said with a grin. Yes, of course. I still didn't understand where she was going. Then I'm going to invest some money, she said simply. However, we will have to hold 3 or 4 meetings to discuss the arrangements. I think 4 would be the ideal number. 2 of these meetings will take place in your office, and 2 will take place at lunch. Meetings. I'll choose the places myself. Okay, I said, still not sure why I was going to do this. I can open an account, but you'll have to invest at least $10,000. Oh, I intend to invest a lot more than that, she said, smiling wider. In the meantime, you won't tell your wife that I'm your client. You will continue to meet with her and discuss reconciliation. In 2 weeks, you'll let her move home, but you won't sleep with her. On October 15th, you and your wife will be attending a gala evening, which is crucial. It will be the evening of the charity organization that I helped found and have been working with for 5 years. Most people don't associate charity with me, and I like that. I attend charity events every 2 years. I would not have attended this year because I was at the last gala concert. However, I will be present, and you and your wife will be there too. Okay, I'll be by your side at the charity gala. I know for a fact that tickets to this event cost $20,000 each. I can't justify spending that kind of money. Rita giggled again, then smiled. The tingling went from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. Your tickets will be free. You just tell your wife that a client gave them to you. I still don't understand how this achieves anything. I was getting frustrated now. Well, you see, John, part of the night's entertainment is an escort auction. An escort auction? Not that kind of escort, she giggled again. We sell willing men at auction to the women present. The woman or man who pays the most for a particular person will put something like a slave collar on him. Then men are at the mercy of the women who paid for them. Rita set with a laugh before continuing. Most of them are single, but married men flaunt themselves so that their wives can bet on them. Sometimes a married man is bought by someone other than his wife. I assume that these married men behave in the best possible way because otherwise their wives would cut off their balls. However, at this year's gala, one married man will be auctioned off and his wife will not win the auction. And what happens after that won't be innocent. There was still a look of bewilderment on my face. Rita laughed and patted my hand. You're a married man who's going to be auctioned off. And I'm the one who's going to have the winning bet. So you just need to rent a tuxedo by your wife, a new dress, and be my guests. It suddenly dawned on me what Rita was planning, and it was brilliant. Both Brad and Abby were going to feel what it was like for us. Of course, I understood that all this was for show, but still, just spending the night with Rita Summers while everyone assumed that the worst could happen would help balance the act scales in many ways. It would take the cuckle's horns off me and put them on Brad. Besides, my wife would feel the same pain and humiliation as me. Then, maybe we could meet with a consultant and put all this behind us. The following weeks passed very quickly. I have to say that the first time Rita walked into my office, I thought all the girls there would pee in their pants. Our lunch meetings were held in very private restaurants. I didn't understand why we had these meetings in secret. Everything essential could be discussed in my office. Most of the time, we just told each other stories. It was a fun lunch, and I learned a lot about Rita and Brad. She really loved him, and she would be devastated if they broke up, but she was ready to leave him if he was going to continue acting the same way. A week before the gala, I let Abby come home. However, I told her that I would sleep in the guest room. It hurt, but she didn't insist. On the Wednesday before the gala, I returned home with the tickets, and Abby's eyes lit up. She started ranting about all the celebrities who would be there. When she scolded me for spending such a sum of money, it didn't cost me anything. I told her. One of my clients asked me if I could use the tickets. I thought it would be a fun evening. By the way, I think you should buy a new dress. Buy something beautiful. Abby was floating in the clouds, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered that night when I thought it would be a magical night for the two of us just to look like a fool. It's time for her to feel my pain. When we arrived, we found that there were already about 500 people there. When we checked in, there was a table where you could sign up to participate in the auction. I saw a line of men filling out forms. There were 5 really handsome men in line. So I turned to Abby. "What do you say, Abby?" I asked innocently, pointing at the table. "It's a charity, and we didn't pay anything for the tickets. What do you say if I sign up and you can bet on me?" Abby giggled, but it wasn't nearly as musical as Rita's. "I don't have any money, and I didn't even bring my wallet with me because it wouldn't fit in this back. According to Rita's suggestion, I had cash with me. Here's $1,000. I doubt you'll have to pay more than $50, but this is charity, so offer at least $200. You're worth a whole $1,000 and much, much more," Abby said, with a big smile. I got in line, and when I got to the check-in table, I filled out a form and signed it. I looked at the list, and it turned out that there were about 18 or 20 guys signed up. If I hadn't known it was a setup, I would never have had the courage to do it. When I was about to turn away, the woman behind the counter asked, "Are you married?" I nodded, and she pulled out another form. "I hope your wife is with you, otherwise you will not be able to participate. She needs to fill out this form and sign it." I called Abby over and explained what they wanted. She quickly filled out the form. What Abby didn't understand, because she hadn't read the form, was that she was agreeing to let me do whatever the winning bidder asked. After the paperwork was done, we went in search of our table. Rita sat us down at a table with 2 stars, 1 TV presenter and 2 actors in a national soap opera. My wife had stars in her eyes, not only from the people at our table, but also from other celebrities at the gala. When the auction started, all the men offering themselves were called out. I smiled at my wife and stood up. As it turned out, there were 24 participants, and I'm sure that it was Rita's idea that I was left for last. By the time I was the last one on stage, they had already raised over $300,000. And I have to admit that the bidding was lively and funny. "Our last contestant is a local," said the announcer, a well-known game show host. "His name is John Sawyer, and he is married with 2 children. I'm sure his wife is out there emptying a piggy bank somewhere. So, what do you say if we start bidding at $50? "I think it's worth at least $100, an elderly woman in front shouted. "Do you know how to wash dishes, dear?" I laughed and shouted back, "I can wash and dry it." This caused loud laughter in the crowd. "This is more than my husband can do." Another elderly woman exclaimed, "I'll give you $200. Then it became $500. Finally, I heard Abby shout, "I'll give you $1,000. This caused general rejoicing. But almost immediately, a younger woman offered $2,000. Before I knew it, the bid went up to $5,000. I looked at Abby, and she was looking around, completely confused. I just shrugged my shoulders, looking at her. An offer of $10,000 came from the back of the room. This was quickly followed by the next $15,000. If I hadn't known it was all staged, I might have had a headache. The bet reached $25,000, and I started to get a little nervous. I thought a few $1,000s would seal the deal. It was much more than I expected. Finally, from the far end of the room, I heard Rita's voice. "I'll bet you $100,000. There was stunned silence, not only because of the amount, but also because of who had placed the bet. Rita Summers came down just below the stage as the crowd roared. She smiled at me. She turned to the crowd and said, "And I don't even care if he knows how to wash dishes." There was another roar and cheers in the room. I must admit that I blushed a lot. Rita came over, put a traditional collar around my neck, and kissed me gently on the lips. From the stage, by prior arrangement, we returned to where Abby was sitting. She was stunned. She didn't know what to do or say. So I shrugged my shoulders and said, "Well, I didn't plan this. Abby, but don't worry, it probably won't happen. Here are the car keys. As far as I understand the rules, a Miss Summers thing for the next 12 hours, maybe longer. I'll see you at home tomorrow." Rita and I danced a few dances at the gala. During these dances, she kept nibbling on my ear. I saw Abby watching us with the eyes of a deer in the headlights. When Rita took my arm and pressing her breasts against me, walked out of the ballroom with me. I saw Abby's lips tremble. After the gala, Rita took me by limo to another nightclub. We danced and talked there for an hour. After that, we went to a private screening of the new film. There was no one in the cinema except people from Hollywood's A-list. The movie I thought was shitty. Rita thought so too. But when we talked to the director, we were both delighted with him. Then the limo took us to a very seedy part of the city. After the car was parked, I noticed that there were 2 cars behind us. Rita explained that they were part of her security team. She pointed to 2 dilapidated houses on opposite sides of the street. The one with the porch light still on was once my home. Brad lived in the house across the street. It wasn't such a bad neighborhood back then, but it was still pretty run down. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning when we finally got to Rita's apartment. She explained that she has 6 apartments. 1 in Hollywood, 1 in New York, 1 in Florida, 2 in Europe, and 1 in South America. This particular apartment was 3 floors high, and it could accommodate 2 houses of normal size. We went into the office and Red poured me a drink. Sitting on the couch, I started laughing. I wish I had a camera to take pictures of Abby. I almost feel guilty for doing this, but not really. Rita sat very close to me and put her hand on my knee. John, tell me honestly, did your wife convince you that nothing happened? None of us will ever be able to prove it, but I believe they had physical contact, I said, sadly. That's why it still hurts so much. I know, John, and I'm 99.9% sure that Brad made love to your wife, Rita said angrily, at the thought. I think this twist is fair game. With that, Rita leaned over and kissed me gently. I was stunned by this offer. I just assumed that we would go to Rita's house and sleep in separate rooms. One would believe that we slept together, but we would know the truth. Now she was offering herself to me. It didn't take me long to make a decision. I suppose if I were a better person, I would refuse. But I was still hurt by what my wife had done. Plus, who in their right mind would turn down the chance to sleep with Rita Summers? We made love twice more before falling asleep in each other's arms. I woke up the next morning with Rita. I wish Abby would do something like that to me. I'd love to wake up like this sometimes. We made love again. Then I looked at my watch and realized it was almost 11 o'clock. I should have been home by now. Rita laughed at my crazy expression. Remember, your wife wasn't worried when you were waiting for her at home. And remember, nothing happened. I laughed and we took a shower together. After drying off and getting dressed, Rita cooked eggs for me while waiting for the limo to pick me up. On the way home, I finally found peace. If Abby had wanted to, I felt like we could now work on putting everything behind us. When I entered our house, I found Abby crying in the living room. I wasn't sure if you'd come home, she said miserably. The news is buzzing that Rita Summers paid $100,000 for a night with you. At first I thought it was just payback, but then I saw the way she was looking at you. If she spent that much, she must really care about you. But I don't blame you for what you did. Do we have any future? First of all, Abby, I lied. Nothing happened. She looked at me almost with anger in her eyes, but then she disappeared. Really? Rita is my new client, I told my wife. She felt it was only fair, considering what Brad had done to me. Besides, Rita is the one who gave me the tickets. She usually anonymously makes donations of $100,000 each year. Rita did it publicly this year to send a message to her fiancé. So you're right, it was to repay Brad. Whether we have a future or not is entirely up to you. If you're ready to work on our marriage and go to counseling, I'm ready to. Abby threw herself into my arms, and I kissed her hard. Then I took her to our bedroom. I don't know where I found the strength, but we made love twice. Then I fell asleep again, until my 2 girls attacked me around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We had a quiet dinner with the girls, and after they went to bed, Abby and I sat on our patio holding hands. That's when I realized that we could put the pieces of our marriage back together. The epilogue. Abby and I found a good counselor, Wendy, and she helped us solve our problems a lot. Surprisingly, Wendy was much stricter towards Abby. I assumed that because she was a woman, she would be more sympathetic to my wife. But she pointed out that Abby was planning to take her mind off our marriage, while I wasn't planning on it. Although we both claimed that nothing had happened, I don't think Wendy believed either. of us. Despite this, she said that the simple fact that we decided to leave our spouses with someone was a betrayal. Abby blushed a lot because of most of it. Of course, Wendy gave me a pass of sorts because basically she viewed my night as Rita's revenge on her fiancé. That was true, of course, but Wendy didn't know that I was up to my ears and planning and implementing it. Nevertheless, the sessions were very useful. All this turmoil has one side effect. Abby doesn't like going to the movies anymore. She doesn't even like watching movies on TV. However, she will go with the girls if they want to go to some children's movie. As for Chad and Thelma, I dropped the charges against Thelma. I told the authorities that she thought she was protecting her husband, but I allowed the charges to be brought against Chad. He received 3 months in the district detention center. Chad and Thelma have been expelled from our group, and Abby is no longer talking to Thelma. They had a big fight because Abby blames Thelma for almost ruining our marriage. I won't say that I understand my wife's logic. Rita and Brad got married at the so-called wedding of the century. There were over 1,000 guests there. If you weren't invited, you were nobody in Hollywood. In case you're wondering, Abby and I didn't get an invitation. However, I sent Brad a wedding present. I bought a pair of bullhorns and sent them to him with a note as follows: "You leave my wife alone, and I'll leave yours alone." I was still mad at Brad when I sent the horns, but Rita told me that Brad thought the gift was hilarious. He hung them in his office with a framed note underneath. However, since Hollywood is Hollywood, the marriage lasted barely a year. True to her word, when Rita discovered that Brad was chasing married women again, she divorced him. She was friendly, and they are still friends. It's a pity because I know that Rita loved him deeply. From what she has told me about their relationship over the years, I know that they did have a bond that goes much deeper than most couples. But obviously that wasn't enough. And yes, Rita is still my client. When we opened her account, she deposited $1 million. I fully expected her to close the account as soon as her planned revenge was completed. But Rita left it with me. When the amount grew to $1.5 million, she contributed $2 million more. I haven't seen her in person since the day after the gala, but I talk to her at least 4 times a year to discuss her investments. Sometimes she calls with a question about her account, but sometimes she just calls to talk. I like these conversations the most. Rita is a very smart businesswoman. Surprisingly, she is also quite conservative, at least in her investments. I have no idea what her policy is. Even when I update Rita's portfolio quarterly, we go through her account in about 20 minutes and then spend the next hour or two talking about our lives. After Rita divorced Brad, she told me that she had to leave me and leave Brad. I laughed and reminded her that we lived in 2 different worlds. Since then, Rita has been teasing me by watching me, and it's her supposed plan that if the stars ever line up so that I'm lonely, and she decides to quit acting, she'll do everything she can to get me. I know she's just joking, but it's a good fantasy that I keep in the back of my mind. Abby and I are approaching our 10th wedding anniversary. We've had some difficult moments, but overall it's been a great marriage so far. Looking back, I'm convinced that if Rita hadn't come to my rescue, I would have divorced Abby, and today I can't imagine what life would be like without her. Oh yes, and one last thing. Abby is pregnant, and we're going to have a little boy. I can hardly wait for it.